that was to turn your brains on a little bit more. Certainly trying to, with Dr. On, your brains were going a mile a minute, but I don't know whether you can see that, because could we do something with the lights so that people could see what this is? Is there a way to turn the lights down? Yeah, I mean, it's just slides. Anyway, I began in life with constantly in motion. I have what's called attention deficit disorder. Have you all heard of that, or has anybody heard of ADD or ADHD? Have you shaken, some people shaking their heads? Well, a treatment for that is to move, is to exercise. And this is a picture of me when I was 16. I was always playing sport. I was running, I was playing football, baseball, basketball, and finally tennis. And I played all day long, along with working, but I was always on the move, because I had to be, because I was pushed to do that from internally. But I learned a lot that I needed to do that, because that allowed me to focus. When I was moving, I could focus, and I could be still and be calm. Otherwise, I would get in trouble, talking out in class, or answering people back, not being very kind. You know, it's just it's part of the issue. So when I was exercising, I could do all those things and be a reasonable human being. This is why I wrote these books, okay? Because I knew that movement was so good for me, and I began to notice it in people and my patients, and how movement really affected their lives. Okay, we skipped a slide, but that's okay. Yeah, so the sum and substance of what I write about, and the reason why I'm so passionate about movement and exercise is because I know what it does in the brain, and it helps us regulate our emotions, make our mood better, make our anxiety less, make our attention better, make our stillness better. And it also optimizes our cognition, our ability to think, to remember, to choose the right answer, to scan and choose and be flexible in your thinking. And that's really very important and as we go on in life. Now, all kinds of exercises are good, but play is probably the best. Play, you know, something that you enjoy, something that you come back to, something that you feel good about. And Dr. On's talking about learning, and the little that I could glean from it is if you're excited about learning, if you're excited about what it is you're taking in, you will master it much quicker and better, and you'll live it. Now, this, for me, this started early, but there was this study that came out in the 90s, many, many years ago for you people, but it was, seems like yesterday for me. There was a big international study looking at what prevented the onset of Alzheimer's disease. That was a big, big study. And what they found were three things: ideal weight, continuous learning, and exercise, physical exercise. Well, we sort of knew about the first two, but exercise, physical exercise preventing Alzheimer's disease, that was not anybody's clue. So one of the professors went back and decided, well, I'm going to find out what exercise does to the brain. So he got a bunch of mice, and he tested them on the college entrance exams, okay, you know, the mice entrance exams. And then he had half of them learn how to run on the running wheel, and for 7 days or 10 days, they would run on this running wheel, and they would run 4 kilometers a night. 4 kilometers is a long way for a little mouse with little legs. Then they retested them, and those that were on the running wheel improved their scores by about 50% as compared to their brothers and sisters who didn't have the running wheel for those 7 days or 10 days of the study. Repeated it many times because he couldn't believe it, that there was this big difference. Then he looked at their brains and saw that the top part of their brain was thicker than their brothers and sisters when they looked at their brains. They weren't, no change. Their brains of the running mice were heavier. They weighed more. And one part in particular was bigger, the part that's involved in memory, the hippocampus, sort of the intersection of all of our information to get to a memory. So that was thicker. Well, this set the world of neuroscience on fire. So there was all these studies that came out looking at exercise and preventing Alzheimer's disease. So today, when you look at anti-aging protocols to how to prevent yourself from aging, number 1 will be exercise, physical exercise. Number 1. Then you have diet, you have sleep, you have connection, being friends with people, being in a group, right? It's all very important. But exercise makes our brains bigger, better. And they measured this substance that Dr. Ahn referenced, BDNF. Before they started running and afterwards, the BDNF went up 200%, twice as high as it was at the beginning. What does this mean? Well, this BDNF we know a lot about. This is a brain fertilizer. This keeps our brain cells young, but it keeps them doing what they're supposed to do, which is to grow. Okay, this is very important that our brains continue to grow, or else that we start to retract them. We start to get away from, our brain cells start to get smaller and then die. And this is what happens as we age. Next slide, please. So then I heard about this school in Naperville, Illinois, in about 2000, because they were featured on one of our big programs because only 3% of their children were overweight. At that point, 33% of American children were overweight. Something was different. I'll tell you what was different was that they had physical education, physical activity every day for 45 minutes, moving and playing. And everybody was involved, not just the athletes. Everybody was moving. So this led to them being very healthy, very physically fit. And lo and behold, all 97% of their children took the International Science and Math Test, which every country takes every 3 years. You all here in Korea are always in the top 5 somewhere. Well, the US were in the 20th. We're not very good. they took it as a country, and they came in #1 in the world in science and #6 in math. This got me on an airplane to go see this place, because I was so convinced that this was an example of using exercise or using movement or using play to get a result of getting our brains to work better. So I went there and started to worked on my book, Spark, which you all have heard about. Also around that time, I got a new dog, a Jack Russell. Does anybody have a Jack Russell in the room? No. They're maybe not so popular here because they're a handful. They all have attention deficit disorder. The whole breed, they're always moving. They're always causing trouble. So I took him to the vet, and the vet said, put him on medicine now. I didn't do that, but I got an exercise program for him that I'll talk about in a little bit. And that led to 2 areas of my whole career have been in attention deficit disorder and exercise. And they really merge with one another because we learned from the very beginning that if we get our kids and adults who have attention deficit disorder to move, that their ADD symptoms go away or go less, make it less. So they're both part of my lifeblood. Next slide, please. Now, so I wrote Spark, and I went back to figure out or try to understand why movement was so important. Well, when we were hunter-gatherers, evolutionarily speaking, and it's only a couple million years ago we were hunter-gatherers. This is when our brains grew really big. And we were moving on average 8 to 12 miles a day, moving, walking, foraging, climbing, lifting, swimming, running some, but mainly moving. And so this was the time that our brains grew really big. Next slide, please. This part of the brain grew huge during that time. And this part of the brain grew big to help us direct and plan our movements. Okay, initially just to move correctly so that we could become the evolutionary victors. And as we got bigger groups and began to use words, we began to use this area where we planned, where we predicted, where we understood, where we remembered. On movements, we learned to use those same cells up here to think with. And this is where the magic happened. That our moving brain, which is a big part of our brain, is our thinking brain. Next slide, please. So one of our great neuroscience leaders said early on that that's what we call thinking, is the evolutionary internalization of movement. In other words, movement drove our ability to think. It gave us the part of the brain that we now think with, and so they're intimately tied together. So when you're moving, you are accessing that part of the brain that we think with. It's turning them on. And one of the things we learned is that we think of the brain as a muscle. that when we use it, it gets better. You don't wear it out, especially if you take breaks. You don't wear it out. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Next slide, please. And especially the front part of the brain, which is all about where we think, where we plan, where we organize, where we delay a response, where we control ourselves, where we evaluate consequences, where we learn from our mistakes, and where we maintain our focus. So it's a very important area of the brain that we, and those of us working in attention deficit disorder, we want to turn this part of the brain on all the time. Well, when we move, we really activate this part of the brain. It really turns that part of the brain on and allows us to stay focused, to plan, to think better. Next slide, please. So we've known that when we move, we turn the whole brain on. And this is a famous slide looking at a bunch of kids who came in and had their QEEG measured, sitting in a chair. They went out for a 10, 15-minute walk, just walk, right? Came back in and had their QEEG measured again. And the QEEG is quantified EEG, which sort of indicates how much brain activity is going on. And you can see the difference from there to there. So a little bit of movement, 10, 15 minutes of movement, turned the brain on, got it ready to participate. So this is why we recommend movement in the morning when you're going to school, movement before your class. And what we're doing with brain fitness is having lots of good, fun movement before they sit and go in to learn their lesson that day. So we're finding that and proving that is really key in helping retain the information and use it better. And we're just on the first leg of it, but we're going to show that with Dr. Ahn and brain fitness. Next slide, please. Now, next slide. It's too complicated. So when we are moving, we turn the brain on. We turn the brain systems on, the attention system, the memory system, the language system, the math system, all the areas of the brain that are involved with those kinds of things, and also our emotional system. And then we work at the cellular level too with movement. We cause a release of all kinds of good stuff, neurotransmitters, growth factors, hormones, that are all positive in making our cells plastic. Okay, plastic, meaning ability to change, ability to grow. And this is what exercise can do. And then we discovered in 1999 that we humans are making new brain cells every day. And we followed that out and realized and found that nothing makes us grow more brain cells than physical exercise. Any kind of exercise will promote the growth of brand new brain cells. So we get all this stuff added if we're moving. Next slide, please. And the systems that when you turn on the front part of the brain for ADD, for anything, for after you exercise, is you help deal with impulse control or bad behavior. Or, and what we find is when we've gone to a school and introduced exercise into the schoolroom, we see a drop in problems with their behaviors. The principals love it. They're not as busy. It improves attention, improves arousal, it turns them on, and it improves motivation. After you exercise, you're more prone to be interested in whatever comes next, and allows you to participate in a more meaningful way because you're more positive. And also, and I'm a psychiatrist and worry about these things, it decreases your anxiety, improves your mood, which is really key and crucial, and combats depression, improves your self-esteem, and helps deal with stress and stress hormone. Next slide, please. So what happens when you learn something? The magic is here between the cells. This is the dendrite that comes in, that contains neurotransmitters. It's released and it goes across to the axon, where it transmits the information. Well, the more you stimulate these cells, the more neurotransmitter you're going to make, and the more receptors you're going to have. So that's what it means when we talk about making a better bond. You grow in the information, and exercise allows that to happen quicker and better, and so that you can build on that and you can learn something in a better way. Next slide, please. Next slide. We'll forget this. Now, one of the things that we've known in psychiatry is that exercise does a good job in making our moods better. But we didn't know it from just recently. Hippocrates, in 300 BC, before Christ, 300 years before Christ, he wrote in his first medical textbook, that the way to treat bad humors or depression is to go for a long walk. And then he said, if they come back and they're still depressed, he sends them out walking again. Keep on walking. Well, that same thing occurs today. If we move and exercise, we can treat the bad humors. We can treat our bad moods. And in fact, years ago now, looking at studies comparing exercise, people that, a whole group of 250 people that came into Duke University Medical School over a 4 or 5 year period, and they were depressed. And they volunteered in a study. In one group, they put into giving medicine, one of our antidepressants. Another group, they just started them exercising three times a day. After 4 weeks, both groups were undepressed. And there was no question that exercise was as good as our antidepressants. And that is so important, especially for you all here in Korea, because you guys are, in general, among the best in the world in learning and test taking, but also you have a lot of adolescent depression. A lot more than a lot of other countries. So again, it's a good reason for you all to be moving and exercising. Next slide, please. Now, my dog. What I did, every morning I took Jack. I named him Jack, of course. He's a Jack Russell, and I was feeling very creative at the time. So I called him Jack, right? I took him outside in the backyard where we had a little hill, and I took along 3 tennis balls. And I threw one to the top of the hill. He went running right after it, up there, grabbed it, came back down to show me that he had it and was not going to drop it, because they're bred not to drop the fox or their ball or their stick that they're bringing to you. They hold on to it for dear life. But then I had 2 other tennis balls. So I threw the second one up the hill, and he looked, and he didn't know what to do because he didn't want to drop the first ball, but then he decided, I got to do this. So he dropped the first ball, went up for the second ball, and came back down, and we had a game. So I had him going up and down, and got him exercised in the morning, right? Next slide, please. So this is what happened. He came in and was able to do his homework. They're very smart dogs as well. And he no longer was running around and chasing us and demanding that we pay attention to him and engaging us and causing trouble like so many ADD kids can be. And so he was able to we treated his ADD with the exercise. But then sometimes, next slide please, I can't take him out, and he's on his own. He doesn't have the exercise. So what happens? He gets into trouble, and gets back at me. Next slide, please. Now, one of the big issues of what kind of exercise people should be doing. Well, play, fun, laughter, engagement, interest is the best. If you can be playing, wow, then you won't feel like burdened that you're doing that, and that you're having to do this exercise. Now, the other day we were with Dr. Ahn and looking at that group that he showed you. They were laughing. They were playing. It wasn't exercise. It wasn't what people think of, oh, I'm going to have to go sweat and do all that. No. They were running around and playing. They were trying to beat their scores, trying to be first, trying to follow the directions, and it was fun. And they were laughing. So for 20 minutes, they were, moving the whole time, getting their heart rates up. The reason why we talk about their heart rates, because that's a measure of how much activity your body is going through, but also your brain is having to deal with all that. Because when you move your muscles and change everything with your movement, your brain has to respond. That's why we talk about the brain being switched on. It's turned on. And a nice thing was that now we've included a lot of balance and coordination exercises in their play, because that, we know in the past 10, 15 years, is so important for the brain development, for cognition, for improving our cognitive skills. So we are, I love seeing the new stuff that we're doing at the Brain Fitness Group, because it's evolved from where we were before, and it's great because they're playing, 2, they're having to move and change and have to work on without them knowing it. They're increasing their ability to balance and be more coordinated. They don't even know it. And play is something that is so key. Next slide, please. Then we have the problem of sitting. the problem of inactivity. Well, anyway, it's a long story, but neuroscience people write these incredibly interesting papers to them and to other people who are in neuroscience, but they're left not having much fun. But sometimes they come up with great titles to their paper. So this long paper was written about the people not moving, and the author, the neuroscience wonderful guy, called it the revenge of the sit. That is, sitting is, can lead to not just being overweight, but in not activating our brains. Next slide. Now, this is sort of caught fire, and I show this slide because it's now about 12 years old, 10 years old, anyway, where we're with the people who run Harvard University. And this was the dean at the time, and she was a walker. So she appreciated movement. So we started a program called Harvard on the Move, where we have a movement for the students at different times during the day. Every day, there's something that they can do, whether it's running, walking, biking, walking with the president of Harvard. She did that on a Thursday afternoon, and she had 40, 50 students walking with her, talking and whatever. But it's still being activated today. I mean, it's now in its 10th year. And I get an email every morning, this is what we're doing today, come along, meet me here. And it's really quite, it's been ingrained in the program because it helps the students move and learn and be positive. Next slide, please. Now, one of the good movement techniques is called HIIT, High Intensity Interval Training. And I thought I'd show you what I look like doing HIIT. You go really, really fast for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then take a break. But that really activates your brain and turns it on, and you can finish your workout in 10 minutes. In fact, one of the scientists from Canada wrote a book called The 1 Minute Workout. In other words, to work out for 1 minute only. But, but it's something like this, going, faster than you should. Next slide, please. So, the questions are, what exercise should I be doing? What exercise? Everything. All the exercise is good. Aerobic, strength training, balance, yoga, tai chi, martial arts. Very, very good exercise to have. Any kind of rhythmic exercise. And dance, dance, dance. This is why we were looking to go to work with BTS and all the K-pop dancers to get them involved with the schools, because that's something that students would like to do, perhaps, in the classroom or in the hallway. It would be fun, it would be engaging, but dance, I mean, the deal about what kind of exercise to do is this, is what is going to turn, what kind of exercise are we going to engage most of our brain? Well, there's nothing better than dance or martial arts or, fast moving yoga even. But because you have to plan, you have to work with the music, work with the rhythm, work with a partner or a group. And when you look at K-pop dance, it's amazing how they all work together. Well, it's not only fun and listening to the music, but it really makes their brains work a lot. And that's what we want. We want those brains to work a lot in doing something that's not tearing apart David Hume or Spark. You know, it's something you're having fun doing. And the best kind of exercise is fun, is play, and with somebody. That is also the key, because if you do it with somebody, you get the benefits squared. You know, I mean, your brain is you have to pay attention to the other person. You want to keep up with them or beat them or compete with them, but it really makes a big difference. As well, doing it outside if you can. You know, it's hard here in Gangnam, but you know, there's plenty of places to exercise around here, and you in Korea have followed the Japanese with their forest bathing. You familiar with the term? To get out in the forest, because it really has a positive effect on you just by being out in nature. Well, if you exercise out in nature, my goodness, that's a big bonus. Final slide. Yeah. You get the heart rate up, you do something fun, you work with others, because that makes it so much better. And if you can do it outside, you're really doing the best you can do for your brain. So, thank you for your attention. I'm glad we did the exercise to begin with. I can tell you're more attentive than you would have been.